Once there was a great king named Sisyphus, ruler of Corinth, one of the most powerful cities of ancient Greece. He was renowned for his cunning and his uncanny ability to always come out on top. He believed he was the cleverest man alive and thought he could outwit anyone. Time and again, his wit allowed him to triumph over his enemies and even challenge the gods of Olympus. But with every victory, his pride grew stronger. He came to believe that his intelligence placed him above every law and that he would never have to face the consequences of his actions. Yet the gods had been watching him closely, and they decided the time had come to put Sisyphus, the king of Corinth, to the test. One day, Zeus, the Greek god of the sky and thunder, decided that the time had come to punish Sisyphus. Weary of the king of Corinth's arrogance and his constant defiance, Zeus ordered Thanatos, the Greek god of death, to descend into the world of mortals and escort Sisyphus's soul to the underworld. But Sisyphus achieved the unthinkable. He outwitted Thanatos. When the god of death arrived to carry out Zeus's command, Sisyphus pretended to admire the sturdy chains Thanatos carried with him. "Those are extraordinary chains," he said with genuine curiosity. "I've never seen anything like them. How do they work? Could you show me how they're put on?" Certain that no one could ever escape his chains, Thanatos agreed to demonstrate. He fastened the chains around himself to explain how they worked, and in that very instant Sisyphus snapped them shut, trapping the god of death. Thanatos was left helpless, bound, and utterly humiliated. With Thanatos imprisoned, death vanished from the world. No one could die. The elderly continued to grow older, the wounded suffered endlessly without finding peace, and soldiers who had fallen in battle remained alive. What had first seemed like a miracle soon disrupted the balance of all creation, alarming both the gods and humankind alike. Years passed, and at last the gods succeeded in freeing Thanatos. This time, Sisyphus could no longer escape his fate, and death finally came for him. Yet before his death, Sisyphus had prepared one final deception. He instructed his wife that no matter what happened, she must not perform his funeral rites or leave the traditional offerings that, according to ancient Greek custom, honored the dead and allowed their souls to rest in peace. When Sisyphus arrived in the underworld, he appeared before Hades and his wife Persephone, wearing an air of righteous indignation. "My wife has dishonored me," he declared. "She never held my funeral or performed the sacred rites. Allow me to return to the world of the living for a few days so I can correct this terrible offense. I swear that I will return as soon as everything has been put right." Convinced by his apparent sincerity, Hades and Persephone granted his request. Sisyphus returned to the world of the living with the promise that he would go back to the underworld once his wife had performed the proper funeral rites, but that promise was nothing more than another of his deceptions. Back in Corinth, he continued to rule his kingdom and lived a long and prosperous life. He had cheated death for a second time, and for many years he believed he had outwitted even fate itself. But no one can escape the passage of time forever. As Sisyphus grew old and the end of his life finally arrived, death returned to claim what was rightfully its own. This time there were no tricks and no escape. He was taken once more to the underworld to face the judgment of the gods at last. There, weary of his endless deceit and relentless defiance, the gods sentenced him to a punishment that would last for all eternity. The punishment was as simple as it was cruel. Sisyphus had to push an enormous boulder to the top of a steep hill, but just as he was about to reach the summit, the stone would slip from his control and roll all the way back down into the valley. Then he had to descend, once again place his shoulders against the boulder and begin all over again, and again, and again, without rest, without reward, and with no possibility of ever bringing his task to an end. Thus Sisyphus was condemned to repeat the same effort for all eternity. His punishment was not merely the boulder itself, but the absolute futility of his labor, to devote all his strength to a task that would never reach its end. In this way, the man who had defied death and deceived the gods was ultimately forced to experience the absurd firsthand. An immense effort, repeated endlessly, devoid of purpose and condemned never to be completed. That would be his fate for all eternity.